Welcome to Decode Your Burnout, the podcast where we crack the code on burnout based on three primary factors: your programming, environment, and personality. We also feature experts who debunk the myths about what it takes to be successful in their industry and spin those tips to fit the workplace so you can optimize the way you work. I'm your host, Dr. Sharon Grossman, a psychologist turned coach, author, and burnout expert. If you're burned out and want to go from exhausted to extraordinary, book a free breakthrough session with me by going to bookachatwithsharon.com. And if you want to see how you're doing and what to focus on next, download the Burnout Checklist. You'll find the link in the show notes or go to bit.ly/checkyourburnout. Now let's get started. Hello, Decode Your Burnout fans, and welcome to another episode with me, Dr. Sharon Grossman. Today, I'm joined by Reed Davis, a board-certified holistic health practitioner and certified nutritional therapist. He's an expert in functional lab testing and holistic lifestyle medicine. He is the founder of Functional Diagnostic Nutrition and the FDN Certification Course with over 4,000 graduates in 50 countries. Reed served as a health director at a wellness center in Southern California for over 10 years, and with over 10,000 clients is known as one of the most experienced clinicians in his field. Reed serves on the advisory board of the American Natural Wellness Coaches Board and the American Association of Natural Wellness Coaches. Reed, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you, Sharon. I'm very happy to be here.
Well, I often like to start with your burnout story so that our listeners can listen and hear the different versions that burnout really shows up for people. So if you have a story and you would like to share it, please, you have the stage.
Wow, thanks. That's pretty challenging because I'm a guy who, like a man's man. I grew up with a dad and an older brother who were just tough as nails, made of leather. We were just told, you're waterproof, don't worry. Like if it's raining outside, keep working. And owies don't matter. You spit on it, put a Band-Aid on. I mean, my whole life, it's just been, how much can you take? How tough are you? With sports, and I did 4 or 5 different sports and had motorcycle accidents, been riding bikes for 50 plus years and things. So you don't complain in my world. That's the old style, I know. But man, in a few years, well, about 4 years ago, I met my current wife, my beautiful wife. And but we met at a conference, and she's living in a foreign country. So eventually it worked out. We're going to immigrate her to the United States, and it took 2.5 years of a lot of challenges. Bringing her closer so I could visit her when she had to stay out of town for 3 months, in for 3 months, out of town for 3 months, in for 3 months. If you add up the sum total, I rented a condo in Cabo San Lucas for over a year just to accommodate, because I wasn't flying to England every so often. I just wasn't going to do it. She's from England. So it was pretty stressful. A lot of things going on in business, handling the growth. We've grown really fast. And everybody thinks, oh, look, all the money you're making and blah, blah. No, it's all the people you're hiring and managing and training. And, there's a lot of things going on linearly with just managing it all. And there's also your creativity. In my world, I have to be very creative and thoughtful and have time to myself and peace, and just in that state you can't have any rear view mirror. You just got to be always forward thinking, looking forward. And last year we still hadn't got, now she's here, thank God she's got a green card, and we're the happy home. I have a beautiful home and place, and it's better. But man, I did get burned out. I went out for New Year's, as a matter of fact, with my son. I can't keep up with anymore, and I got COVID. I came home the 1st of January with COVID, and it kind of kicked my ass. I hate to admit it. I thought for 2 years, I'm like, I didn't even get it, like it hasn't even, I'm immune to it, and all that. And I'm not vaccinated and don't plan to be. So, and I don't care if anyone else is, but yeah, it took me down a notch, and I had to realize that, look, my next birthday, I'll be 70, and maybe it's time to just chill a little bit, take better care of myself. So now I have my wife here, I'm really applying that. I've been teaching how to be healthy for 23 years, and didn't really, just always had that be tough, you're healthy, you're fine. And now I'm paying a little more attention.
Yeah, well, I love me a good burnout story, and you've brought up a number of different things as I can see why it was so stressful for you. Number one, the whole international thing with your wife and trying to bring her in and having all those bureaucratic restrictions is really stressful. And then on top of it, I think you were saying you were going through that during COVID.
Yeah, this is recent. The last 4 years, we met 4 years ago. Now we're married, happy, living in paradise in Southern California. But it was a journey, and with the legal fees and the back and forth and the, like you said, bureaucracy and that.
Yeah.
What I said was that my business was expanding at the time, so I also had to pay a lot of attention to that. And expansion is wonderful if you manage it right and don't get burnt out. And I was doing pretty good right up until, pow, pow, I think my resistance was down with all the stress, and I got the big bad C word.
Yeah. So you've got the bureaucratic stuff that you're dealing with, you got the business stuff. And, I love that you brought this specific example, because sometimes we think about burnout and stress as a really negative thing, but sometimes we get stressed out because of great things in our life, right? Like your business is growing is a really good problem to have, but it's also stressful because, as you said, you have to manage it. You have to know how to deal with all the different moving parts. And that's a lot for one person, as well as going through all the other things at the same time. And that's what we often see, is that people are getting stressed from all different directions. And it's the accumulation of all that stress that builds up into burnout, because it becomes chronic.
Absolutely right. And in my training that I do, I talk about distress versus eustress.
Yes.
So eustress, and I have this picture that I think you'd like. So I have this picture. It's taken by a cameraman of my son skydiving, and he's free floating, by himself. It's on a certification dive. They're about 2 miles up in the air, and you can see the curvature of the earth behind him, and he's right there. Again, his trainer who took this picture. And so I asked people, is that eustress or distress? And almost all the guys go, eustress, that's good stress. You're falling at 100 miles an hour, but you're really digging it, and you could die, but that's just part of the game. And all men that I've ever shown it to, and a lot of women too, they go, oh, that's eustress, that's good for you. Eustress is the kind of stress that a butterfly, when it's coming out of its cocoon, it squeezes all the liquid out into its wings so that it can fly. So that's eustress, and that's a good thing. But when I showed that picture to his mom, it was distress.
Exactly. It's all about perception.
Oh my
right?
God. Oh my God. My son's falling at 100 miles an hour, and his parachute hasn't opened up yet. He was in his free fall. And oh my God, that kind of panicked her, So eustress, distress, and which one is it? Sometimes it's how you look at it.
It's exactly right. And I'm really grateful that you brought that up, because when we think about stress is really about perception. It's not something that's happening. It's our interpretation of what's happening. And our interpretation really is going to change depending on the mood that we're in and how resilient we're feeling. And if you're, as you said, if you're sick, or if you have like a lot of other things going on and you're just tapped out, then it's harder to have a more positive outlook on things. So these are all really nice, kind of like coming back to the basics for people when it comes to stress and burnout. But we're here to talk about something even more niche than that. You have a very, very specific training in holistic health, which I think a lot of our listeners would benefit from hearing about. And I imagine that as you've been working throughout these couple of decades in this field, you've seen that there are some myths that people carry around about stress, about health. And so I would love it if you would share what are the top 3 myths and maybe debunk those for us so that we can learn from you about your point of view and the work that you do.
Yeah, thanks so much. There's so many discoveries I made. Just I started in a clinic in the last century as a nutritionist, and I was running a lot of laboratory work at the time. That's kind of my claim to fame, is I ran more labs than any 5 doctors put together. You couldn't do it, is why. And I'm not even a physician. I just had the access to these labs and was looking for patterns and ways to help people without diagnosing and treating specifics like physicians do, but just really look for what's wrong. So one of the biggest myths I came across is I'm going to find the root cause. Now, that's a worthy endeavor, and everyone says it. I used to have it on my handle. I get to the root cause. I see it on people's handle now in their signature bar on their emails and things like that. But I have to tell you, after running thousands and thousands of labs on thousands of clients and patients at the clinic over a 10-year period, man, there's never one. There's always multiple causal factors upstream. So everyone knows, symptoms are at the bottom, they're at where the stream goes out into the body. You're feeling whatever the symptom is. To me, it doesn't really matter. I'm always going to look for the root cause, but you're always going to find multiple causal factors. And so there isn't one root cause. Here's another thing, Sharon, that I'm not sure anyone else thinks about. I haven't heard anyone else saying it. Those causal factors are all having an effect on each other.
Yes. Oh, I'm so glad you said that.
And a lot of that's not even measurable. So I'm the lab guy. I teach a course now in functional lab work and natural protocols as it applies to all natural drug-free protocols. You understand the lab work in a way that these are the healing opportunities. That's the phrase I use instead of diagnosis. I don't care about diagnosis. I care about what's out of balance, what's wrong. And the pattern I recognized was hormone, immune, digestion, detoxification, energy production, and nervous system. You could throw in oxidative stress, but HIDDEN, which makes it cute, makes it easy to remember. And those are the areas. I mean, the first 300 tests I ran were just hormone tests. Well, then I realized that got people over the hump a little bit. But you know what? They had problems. They had detoxification problems. They had immune system problems. So as a true holistic thinker and not a doctor, able to specialize and zero in on one part, one problem, one fix, that wasn't working for our people coming in our office who were there for alternative. They'd been to 6 or 8 doctors or practitioners. So I gave up root cause. Root cause is a myth. There's never more than, and you may not be able to measure it. It could be so far upstream, who knows? But you can measure things that are upstream. Again, I call it this constellation of healing opportunities: hormone, immune, digestion, detoxification, energy production, nervous system, those hidden dysfunctions and imbalances. And when you get enough data points, enough dots, so to speak, then when you know who that person is and apply it to that one single individual person, you have the ability to connect the dots for them. There's no cohort in holistic medicine. There's no cohort. There's just individuals. And so when you have the data, we call it gathering intelligence, which would include like physicians do a good history taking and all that stuff. Now you've got enough data points to connect the dots. So we're a pretty tough discipline that we require more. There's no one lab. There's no one root cause. You've got to understand at least that pattern and how they're affecting each other. Then you can apply the natural principles of health building, the principles of health to every cell, tissue, organ, and system, the entire organism at once. That way you're not treating anything specifically. You're treating everything non-specifically. So I think root cause is kind of a myth.
Well, what you're basically saying is it's not one thing, and there's probably different areas where people commonly fall off. And those are, now that you know what they are, you call them hidden, which I love the little acronym, but they're not hidden to you because you're aware of what to look for. And that's why we need experts like you, because they know, what are the common themes that show up. I can look for those, and then I can find what all the root causes are, not just the one, which is very similar, by the way, to what we do here on this show. We talk about decoding burnout. And the whole premise here is that burnout shows up for different reasons for people. And so when people share their burnout story, what I'm always listening out for are their programming as a first thing. And you had talked about in your story a lot of the conditioned thinking that you got. You said, you have to be tough as nails, you have to be waterproof, you don't complain about things. And sometimes when we have that mindset, we end up pushing ourselves a little too far. We don't really pay attention to our bodies. And when we start to lose energy and have trouble sleeping, sometimes people ask me, how is it that people are burning out and they don't even know it? And I think it's exactly when you have that mentality that sometimes people are just so accustomed to driving themselves hard that they don't know anything else, right? And it comes from that programming. And the second thing is environmental stressors. And kind of like in your story, you had so many different environmental stressors that you were dealing with. And it's the accumulation of all of them that kind of catapulted in the chronic stress that you experienced. And then finally, it's about your personality. So then I break that down also into a thinker, a feeler, and a doer. And I would have to imagine that somebody like you, who's got that mentality of, you've got to be tough, you got to keep pushing, that you're probably a doer. Am I right?
Yeah. My crew, my wife, my staff, everybody, they call me the GSD guy. Get stuff done.
Get stuff done. Yeah.
Just gets done. And definitely a GSD guy.
Yeah.
But I like what you said, I wanted to just, it occurred to me that if it's not root cause, well, what are you looking for? You're looking to sort out metabolic chaos. So I replaced root cause with metabolic chaos. There's just chaos. And you have to use a system to sort it out.
Yes.
And that HIDDEN took it happened within a 10-year period of recognizing those patterns. It's not, I didn't learn it at a seminar from someone else. It's stuff I had to figure out on my own. There was no training for what I had to do.
But that's what makes your work so valuable, because you bring yourself into it and you've created something that's very original. And I think is very valuable for people as you're doing the work that you do. So that's really cool. And so that's really to debunk the myth that, we have to get to this root cause and there's just one thing. We really are looking for a culmination of factors. And given that you've got, these different things that you're looking for specifically, it starts to create a framework, kind of like we do here to decode burnout. We're looking for very specific things. And when you're asking good questions, given these parameters, you get to the answers more quickly. And what I find is it also allows you to then create more customized solutions for healing.
Yeah, it's another, I don't know if it's a medical myth or what you might call it, but that, double-blind placebo-controlled randomized trials will, that's good enough for us. Well, it's not good enough for me, because I'm not a cohort and my clients aren't a cohort. They are an individual with biochemical individuality that it's just unbelievable how individual we all are. And where I learned that, Sharon, was from, you have people with the exact same symptoms and you go, oh, I handled that before. I had a lady just like that last week. We ran this test or two and we did this and that. And the next person doesn't get better. They're like, 3 things can happen when you try something. You can feel better. This has to do with supplements and therapies and drug and anything you might do. You might feel better. You might feel nothing, and you might feel worse. So 2 to 3 out of those are a waste of time. So how do you improve your chances of it's going to work? It must be individualized to that individual. So then you have to understand what does make us different. And it's pretty complex, but let me give you another example of how sorting out metabolic chaos is better than looking for one root cause.
Okay.
And so there's another myth I like to dispel at the time. It all begins in the gut. Everything begins in the gut. Health begins in the gut. Hippocrates, the father of medicine, said it all begins in the gut. I don't think so. And the reason is I've run thousands and thousands of labs on thousands and thousands of people, and I've studied their history and applied it to them as individuals. So real quickly, when you have stress, it affects your anabolic to catabolic hormones, cortisol and DHEA. Cortisol goes up, DHEA goes down, you're in a catabolic state. Even when you're not producing as much cortisol as you used to, your DHEA still usually stays down. These are the catabolic, your stress hormone, DHEA is your anabolic building up hormone. So they have to be in balance. And I learned to just use that ratio to tell me whether a person's in a catabolic state or not. So, hey, your body's breaking down. I can tell by this ratio. Even if cortisol is low, you're going to see DHEA go down even more. So it isn't just cortisol. Oh, you're in an acute stress phase. Oh, you're in an exhausted phase. That's not good enough. And so this cortisol DHEA ratio is really important. And when it is out of balance, you're catabolic. What's the first thing to go? Well, it could be a lot of things it's different things for different people, but one very common thing is the immune system. Your secretory IgA in the gut, which is where 80% of your immune system is, the SIG-A is the leading indicator of immune function. It goes down because of chronic stress. And what happens when then you get the dysbiosis. Your SIG-A is down, you get an imbalance in the microbiome, your good bacteria to bad bacteria go out of balance. And then what? Well, you're compromised. And then I call them bigger, badder bugs come along. You got the real intestinal overgrowth. You got parasites and different kinds of bacteria. You've got fungus, and then those all have toxins. And so there's this whole downward spiral. And oh, by the way, if you have a dysbiosis, not enough good bacteria that good bacteria is used to break down your food, further break down food. After the stomach, it goes in the small intestine. You need that good bacteria. It breaks down, especially your proteins, into the amino acids, which get turned later into, neurotransmitters and peptides and things like that you need in balance. So now you've got another whole cascade going on. You've gone from just stress, doesn't matter if it's mental, emotional, physical pain and trauma, or even just the chemical environment, as you mentioned, which is really critical. You're out of balance. Your immune system and gut flora is out of balance. You're not digesting very well. Your immune system further compromised. And guess what happened? These bigger, badder bugs and the toxins that they bring with them cause leaky gut. You end up with hyperpermeability. And we have all the tests. I have every marker that you need to look at in sequence so that you can watch that happen. But what happens to the person is they go into the doctor or a practitioner and say, I have diarrhea, constipation, indigestion, bloating, gas, heartburn, all this sort of stuff. And so they go, oh, it's the gut. Yep, everything begins in the gut. And it didn't. It started with the stress that has created this downward spiral, this imbalance in catabolic to anabolic. So in our world, we look for imbalances as far upstream as we can go, and all the other things go along with it. The immune, remember, it's hormone, immune, digestion. With leaky gut, you'd have detoxification issues because your liver would be congested, and on and on. So that, I think that's a myth that it all begins in the gut. It doesn't, but it certainly circles around to it real quickly in a lot of people. So it's so common, we just say that.
Right. What I love about that is that, I really deal, when it comes to stress and burnout, I really deal with people's mindsets. And so when you talk about lack of balance, I talk to them about a lack of balance in terms of where they spend their time, right? And what they're focusing on. And are they spending too much time at work and not enough time on themselves and things like that? And you're you're basically looking at very similar parameters, but from a health perspective instead of mental health. And so you're looking at what's actually going on inside the body that when you're out of balance in your life is really wreaking havoc on your system, what's going on internally, and getting back to a place of balance. And you have a really holistic way of doing that. So this is very complementary to the work that I do. And I'm sure that people listening to this would really appreciate that. And I can only imagine that people listening to this might be thinking to themselves, wow, that sounds amazing. I want to know more. And I usually wait until the end to ask this, but maybe you can just give us a notion of where can people go to find out more about the work that you do and maybe getting in touch with you?
So yeah, we would love referrals to what we do, and that works both ways, of course. So what I created is called Functional Diagnostic Nutrition. It's just the name I gave it in 2008 when I had to name it.
Yeah.
And so Functional Diagnostic Nutrition, so FDN. We're referred to, we're in 50 countries now training, and we have practitioners all over the world. So they're doing FDN. We're called FDNers or FDN practitioners, or the FDN community or family, or whatever you want to call it. So fdntraining.com/burnout in honor of this show. So fdntraining.com, use the /burnout. And I believe that what they'll end up at is either a place to take a course tour or start for free. You can start our course for free. We don't want anyone that doesn't love it and want to be part of the community, and we want to give you a taste of it first. So the course tour gives you the curriculum. It's very robust. And then, of course, there's the start for free if you want. So I think that's where people end up if they go to fdntraining.com/burnout.
So that's for them to learn about the system that you teach if they want to be practitioners. Is that right?
They can go either way. If they're only interested in their own health,
yeah,
there's a couple ways to go about that. You can take the course, that alone. I mean, because everyone that takes my course runs all the labs on themselves and gets counseling and mentoring. You have to learn and work on yourself first. One of the prerequisites for our work is to be walking the talk. You don't have to be perfectly healthy, but you got to be marching up the stairs in your own way, whatever that is, your journey. And basically your clients are coming on the journey with you. So that's our philosophy, is that you gotta want to help others, and you want to be walking the talk. So if you took our course and only worked on yourself, that's worth the price of admission. It's not an exorbitant. It's not like going back to school for 2 years. So, but there's also a channel on there to just get hooked up with a practitioner.
Yeah, I was going to ask that, because I'm sure that there's people who are listening to this and they're like, yeah, I want to really dig down. I want to learn. I have a lot of people who are into personal development, but I also have people who are super stressed in terms of how much they already have on their plate, and like they're never going to do this thing, right? But they still want the results and they want to improve their health. And for those people, to just hook up with a practitioner is a really great opportunity. So far you've shared with us 2 different myths that people typically have about, it's important to get to the root cause, and there's only this one, and then it all starts in the gut. And now we know better. And I know you have one more for us.
Oh, I have 10 more, but we only have time for one more. So in that same construct of metabolic chaos, and kind of how we used to look at it, like the myth was adrenal fatigue was a big one. Matter of fact, I loved that construct because it really was easy to show people on paper. Oh, look, we just didn't know the physiology as deep as we do now. 20 some years ago, adrenal fatigue was very popular as a construct, and it's a valuable construct, meaning that you show people this, look, your adrenals are burnt out. Then they're more likely to take action. They're more likely to stay engaged in the program for longer. And then they actually feel better. They actually get better. But the adrenals are actually 4 different glands in one. There's the medulla, which is in the middle. That's your immediate stress response. You talk about fight, flight, boom, nerves from your eyes or ears even go directly to your adrenal medulla. So it'll crank out some adrenaline. They call it norepinephrine and epinephrine now. So it cranks that out. So that's one little organ inside. They're only the size of a walnut on top of your kidneys. They're adrenal, above the renal gland. And so, but then what happens as soon as that adrenaline hits the bloodstream, the hypothalamus pituitary pick it up in the bloodstream within seconds. So first you got your adrenaline, and then the hypothalamus pituitary will send signals, hormonal signals, back to the adrenals. And there are three layers there: the zona reticularis, the zona fasciculata, and the zona glomerulosa. So these are three different zones in the adrenals. So, you might have low production. One makes DHEA, one makes the cortisol, another makes an electrolyte booster. So they're really critical little glands, and they are highly involved in stress and the stress response, which could be caused again by just you get cut off in traffic, or you get punched in the face, or it could be some long-term chronic thing like the air you're breathing. It could even be, as you said, and I love you brought this up, your thoughts and emotions. Hey, because at night you're doing okay, and all of a sudden you think about that jerk at work, and what happens? Your cortisol goes up. You start getting that stress response. So it can easily be, but your body doesn't care. It just responds. And so after a while, you might see production of some of these things go down. Oh, that's adrenal fatigue. You're burnout. But the other thing we used to talk about is the pregnenolone steal. So this takes a little bit more physiology and biochemistry, but there's no such thing as pregnenolone steal either. It's just that the signaling and the receptorship aren't working. The negative feedback loop from the adrenals to the hypothalamus pituitary, that gets less sensitive. So it isn't truly that your adrenals. If you just take a break, get yourself, sort out all the metabolic chaos, the hormones that we're talking about now, the stress hormones thing, and your immune system, and your digestion, and detoxification, and energy production on a cellular level, eating the right foods and things. And then, of course, the autonomic balance, sympathetic, parasympathetic, lots of ways to work on that. So that's that HIDDEN. You apply those principles to every cell, tissue, organ, and system in the body. The adrenal fatigue, which never was really there, it just comes back into balance, and you'll be all right.
Well, Reed, you have shared so much with us today that I'm sure people are sitting there taking notes. It's really
Listen over
fantastic.
again.
Yeah. And I enjoyed listening to not only your burnout story, but also all the work that you've been doing in the world and your contributions and your creativity around it. And I am really excited for the listeners, and I am encouraging everybody to check out fdntraining.com/burnout, because there is something really exciting there for you. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing all of that with us.
Yeah, thank you. I'll just leave you with a final thought, because I have to pick up on something you said that I think should not go unnoticed. And that is that you talked about the mental and emotional stress, and it's in the. So our job as FDN practitioners is to, with any client, we uncover obstacles to healing. Now, it could be poor digestion, poor detoxification, on and on and on, endless number of things. We will sort it all out. But those obstacles to healing can be in the mind and emotions of the person. And that could be easily what's holding you back. Well, there's not a lot of functional lab work for that. You can do neurotransmitters, you can do but a lot of it's how you think, like that sort of, I don't know if it's a burden or what you want to call it, laid down on me by my father, who was a tough guy, and my older brother he was big and bad, like all I had to do is say, I'm Craig's brother, and they'd leave me alone, like don't mess with that boy. His older brother's will brain you. And so I grew up with that kind of parenting and sibling thing. And so I it probably in the long run subjected me to being really too hard on myself. So those things obstacles to healing can be locked in the mind and emotions of the person. And you should never forget that.
Yeah, that's why we're tuning in and learning about our mind every single week. So thank you again for being here. Now, for all of you thinkers out there, what did you think of the show? If you are a feeler, how did hearing this make you feel? And for all you doers, what are you going to do based on what you've heard? Now, regardless of what your personality code is, my goal is to spread the word that burnout is a unique experience. And by decoding it, you can find solutions that are equally unique to you. Help me spread this message by subscribing to the show on Apple or Spotify and leaving us a review telling us what you think, feel, or do differently because of the show. If you're watching us on YouTube, you can leave me a comment or questions to answer in future episodes. And please recommend the show to anyone struggling with burnout. If you are ready to take the next step with me to DYB, go to decodeyourburnout.com, and I'll see you right back here next week. Take care.